Okay, so I shared my screen. Just let me know if it is visible.
हाँ दिख रहा है.
So SAP on Azure. We will understand how SAP is working and how we architect SAP on the Azure cloud. Before that, we need to understand what is Azure. Okay, let's start. SAP workload on Microsoft Azure. What is Microsoft? What is Microsoft Azure? So Microsoft Azure is originally called Windows Azure. It is a public cloud computing platform by public cloud computing platform by the Microsoft that provides hundred of services for creating or hosting the application that range from simple website to enterprise applications such as SAP. So using the Microsoft Azure cloud, you can host any services like website or SAP enterprise services. Understanding the cloud concept. So what is the cloud? Cloud represents infrastructures and applications that are accessible over the internet. Cloud is the collection of cloud services and cloud models. So cloud is the collection of the cloud services and cloud models. So what are the cloud services and cloud models? We will see in detail. So we need to understand basic of the cloud concept. If you understand the basic of cloud concept, then easily you can understand any types of cloud like Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and then uh, AWS. So concept is very important. So what are the cloud services? Cloud services are infra as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So these all are the cloud services. These services are provided by the cloud providers like Microsoft Azure, then Google Cloud, and then AWS or other cloud providers. Cloud models. So what are the cloud models? Cloud models are nothing but the public clouds, private clouds, and hybrid cloud. So these are the cloud models provided by the cloud providers. So what is difference between on-premise models versus cloud models? So on-premise models means in the on-premise models, a business purchase physical computer hardware to be used for its IT needs. Because these computers are physically asset that are intended to be used for more than 1 year. They are usually purchased as a capital expenditures. So on-premise model, we purchase the hardware, okay, and that cost comes under the capital expenditure. So on-premise is the capital expenditure models. Whereas cloud models, when you move to the cloud, you no longer rely on your on-premise computing hardware. Instead, you rent hardware from cloud providers because you are not purchasing a physical asset. You move your IT cost from capital expenditures to a operating expenditures. Operating expenditures are tracked on monthly basis. So it is much easier to adjust them based on needs. So on premise, basically we purchase the hardware and that cost come as a capital expenditure. Whereas cloud models, we don't purchase anything, we rent the infra VMs. So the cost comes under the OPEX. CAPEX and OPEX are there. CAPEX are the example of on-premise and then OPEX is the example of the cloud. Okay, it is very important. So it is in the cloud, it is billed monthly basis. But in on-premise, we purchase hardware for more than 1 year. Like we purchase the hardware. So, for example, uh, we purchase the hardware for 5 years, and then after the 5 years, we will replace this hardware because this hardware will not be suitable after the 5 years. Okay, to handle the my current load. Whatever the load will be there after 5 years, that is not enough. That hardware is not enough to handle those load. So you will upgrade your hardware. You will purchase new hardware in on-premise. Okay, that is come again capital expenditure capex. But in the cloud modules, you can change your hardware anytime. Okay, so you don't need to pay upfront fees in cloud, but on premise you have to pay upfront fees. Okay, in the cloud modules you pay whatever you use, and the bill is monthly basis. So whatever the bill you get, that is based on the monthly. Clear this one? Any questions till now? समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. What are the cloud services? So we have three types of cloud services. We'll see that. So cloud services are divided into three pillars: infra as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Infra as a service is example of VMs. So VMs are or servers are part of infra as a service examples. Platform as a service, the example is are the development tools and then frameworks. Software as a service, the example is the website or application like Facebook, Google Cloud, Gmail, Google Drives. These are the software as a service. Okay, infra as a service. What is the infra as a service? Basically, in detail, we'll see that each and every. Infrastructures refer to the hardware that your application uses, and infra as a service refer to the virtualization infrastructures offered by the cloud providers. When you create a IaaS resource, when you create resource in infra as a service, the cloud provider allocate a VMs for you for your use. So basically, in infra as a service, we create a VMs. Okay, so everything is managed by the cloud providers. We'll see in details. Platform as a service in PaaS environment, cloud provider still provide the infrastructures for you, but they also provide you the operating systems and then the middlewares. Okay, operating systems, then in software installed on top of the OS. Okay, like database, networking. These all types. These all will be provided by the cloud provider in the platform as a service. Software as a service, the cloud provider control everything. In other words, software as a service is a software provided by the cloud providers that is installed on infrastructure completely controlled by the hosting providers. So if you see that your Facebook, then Google Drives, okay, so these all are the software as a service. So you don't manage anything. You go and then you log in and you use those softwares. So that is part of the as a software as a service. We'll see in detail. So infra as a service refer to the hardware that your application uses, and infra as a service refer to the virtualized infrastructures which is offered by the cloud providers. When you create any resource in infra as a service, the cloud provider allocate a virtual machine for your use. You create a VMs in the infra as a service. Okay, you means infrastructure team. You as a customer control the operating systems. As a customers, the customer create the VMs. The customer install the operating systems. On top of the operating systems, we as a basis team, we install the SAP and then database or other services. So you're responsible for making sure your operating system is patched with the security update. So whatever the security update comes in the for the operating systems, the customer is responsible. Customer is responsible for doing the patching, upgrading the operating systems, managing the application, database, networking. Okay, everything is managed by the customers. Cloud provider is only responsible for providing the VMs. Okay, so they will only provide the VMs. The cloud provider will manage and control the underlying hardware of VMs. Infra as a services allow you to control cost effectively because you only pay for them when you are using them. So in this model, whatever you use, you pay for that only. If you stop the VMs, your billing will stop. Okay, so if you start if your VM, then your billing will start. If you stop your VM, then your billing will stop. This makes IaaS, Infra as a Service, an ideal choice if you need developers to have the platform for testing an application during the release. Okay, for example, so this is very this is ideal choice for the developers who want to do the testings for the applications during the released. Okay, so developer can start the VMs, they can test the applications, and then once the testing is done, they can stop the VMs. Okay, so this way your cost is very effectively managed. Inf Infra as a service, IaaS services benefit from scaling and elasticity. So this service models provide you the scaling and elasticities. If you need more VM, so what is basically scaling and elasticity? If you need more VMs, you can scale out to accommodate. Okay, so basically, if you want to, in other words, if you want to have the more VMs for your application, okay, then you add the VMs for your application. That we call a scale out. Okay, once you have done your uh, activity and you don't need that VMs, okay, you can remove those VMs. That is we call scaling. Scaling means scale in means removing the VMs. Scale out means adding the VMs for your applications. This process you can automate in the Azure. Okay, that is nothing but the elasticity we called. Okay, another thing is that scale up and scale out, scale up and scale down. So scale up means if you add more CPU, memory and disk to your VM, we call it scale up. Okay. Scale down means once you remove your memory and the CPU and the disk, that we call a scale down. So when we need this thing, when we can use this types of the feature. like in month-end activities. In month-end activity, the load is more in the systems. So that time we can add additional VMs. Okay, we can scale out the VMs. Okay, and then once the your month-end activity is completed, then we can scale in. We can remove those VMs. This we can automatically manage. This thing can be automatically managed in the Azure. Another example is the yearly sale, festival sale. Okay, if some in festival sale, the people order lot of things, so they access the applications. Okay, in that case, you can also scale up and scale down your VMs. Okay, like this, you can benefit uh, from the services. In nutshell, infra as a service are a great choice if you want to let someone else manage the hardware. Okay, so basically in this infra as a service, you don't manage anything. You don't manage hardware. The hardware is managed by the cloud providers. Okay, so the cloud provider, it can be anyone, Google Cloud, Azure, or AWS. They manage the hardware. We manage the operating systems and then application and data, backup, recovery, everything we manage. They only provide the VMs. They only rent the VMs to us. Okay, so that is nothing but the infra as a service. Any questions here?
No, sir.
Rakesh?
No, sir, it is fine.
Okay, so this scaling and elasticity already covered. Okay, so I explained a lot of things. Okay, fine. To go to that, the theory, the same whatever I explained, same thing is there. So scaling out means it is nothing but horizontal scaling, and then vertical scaling is nothing but a scaling up. Okay, scaling out and scaling up is part of your scaling and elasticity feature in Azure. Now, what is the platform as a service and software as a service? In a platform as a service environment, the cloud provider still provide the infrastructures for you, but they also provide the operating systems, software installed in the operating systems to help you to connect to database, okay, network systems, okay, and many features that enable you to build and manage complex cloud application. So in the platform as a service, the cloud provider will provide you the hardware, okay, and the VMs. Apart from, they will also provide you the platform like operating systems and then database. Operating systems and the database are pre-installed in the platform as a service. You manage your application and data. Okay, you install your applications or you manage your application and your data. Everything is managed by the SCP, cloud providers. You won't get the OS access. You will not get OS access. So everything, all installation will be done by the cloud providers. You will get access to your application and database. You will get your access to your application only and your data only in the platform as a service. Heck is the example for the platform as a service. Okay, so there you manage, you log into your application, you access your data, and you manage your application and your data. Okay, so Heck is the example of the platform as a service. Azure App Services is one of the PaaS offering in Azure. So in Azure Cloud, we have the Azure App Services. Azure App Services is nothing but PaaS modules. Okay, so it has been created on the VMs that's maintained by the Microsoft. So if you want to use Azure App Services, you just create, you select the Azure App Services from the Azure Service Marketplace, and then along with the Azure App Services, the VM is also automatically created by the Microsoft. So Azure App Services is nothing but the web services. Okay, you can say that. Okay, so it is example of the PaaS in Azure. The software as a services, the cloud providers control everything. In other words, software as a services is a software provided by the cloud providers that installed on the infrastructure completely controlled by the cloud providers. Software as a service offer you the flexibility of pay as you go models. You rent your software from the service providers. So basically you rent the software from the service providers. You only responsible for accessing the software, hardware, operating systems, database, application, data, everything is managed by the providers, service providers. Using the SaaS service, not only you do benefit from using the software written and maintained by the someone else, but you can also benefit from allowing the cloud provider to maintain and configure the applications. So your cloud providers will configure and maintain your application. You have to use only. You will get access to your application. Okay, all the developments, configurations, implementations, transport management will be done by the software providers, service providers. The SaaS is the example for the SaaS are nothing but the Microsoft Office 365, Google Cloud, Gmail, and the Facebook. You don't configure anything in this one. You go, you create your ID, you change your settings, user end settings. Okay, you change your preference, you change your photo, videos, first name, last name. Okay, and you use this all the softwares. Okay, so all hardwares hosted used by this services are controlled and managed by the cloud providers. If you see that the comparisons, if you see on premise, you manage everything: data centers, networking, server, storage, virtualization, operating systems, middleware, data, application. You manage in on premise model. As a customer, manage everything. But in infra as a service, you manage operating systems, middleware, data, and then applications. Virtualization, server storage, network, data center are managed by the cloud providers. In the platform as a services, so cloud providers will provide you the operating systems, then database, applications. Okay, you only responsible for accessing and managing your data in the platform as a service. In the software service, everything managed by the cloud providers. As a customer, you are only responsible for your data. Not for data, you are responsible for accessing the applications. Even data is managed by the service providers. Okay, because the data is there at their servers and they are responsible for managing everything. Okay, so provider manage the the white one is the provider manage. Okay, and we access the servers softwares. Any questions here?
Nothing from my end.
No, sir.
Okay, cloud models. So these are the basics. If you understand these all basics, then you will understand any types of cloud like Azure, Microsoft, and then Google Cloud. Concept are same. They are using the same basic concept. What is the cloud modules? So your cloud is the collection of the cloud services and then cloud modules. Cloud services we covered. Now we will see that cloud modules. So what are the cloud modules? We have the public cloud, we have the private cloud, and we have the hybrid cloud. Okay, when we have to go with the public cloud, hybrid cloud, or private cloud, that we will discuss. So what is the public cloud? The most common cloud model is a public cloud. In a public cloud models, you use shared infrastructures that is accessible on public network. The network storage VMs that your application uses are provided by the cloud providers and shared between all customers on the public cloud. So in the public cloud, your hardware is shared, your infrastructure is shared. Your infrastructure is shared by most of the customers, by all the customers, because it is a public cloud. So whatever the infrastructure you are using, it is shared by all the customers. Okay, your public networks, your network storage VMs, that all are on the shared hardware. Okay, and that shared hardware used and shared by many customers. The Microsoft Azure is the example of the public cloud. Google Cloud, AWS is also example of the public cloud. So this public cloud is accessible from anywhere if you have the internet, over the internet. Okay, that's the reason we call a public cloud. Okay, you can control the cost more efficiently because you only pay for the resource you are using. So in the public cloud, basically whatever you are using, you are paying for those services. Okay, so it is a pay as you go models. The cloud providers control the infrastructures. There may also be security concern with operating in the public cloud. The network involved in the public cloud is a public internet and it is available to everyone with internet connections. That means you will need to have security measures in place to avoid unauthorized access to your application and database. Cloud cloud providers realized these issues and they provided the security measures to help protect you, your application and your data. But those security measures may not meet your security requirements. Security is the customer responsibility, not the cloud providers. Cloud provider manage the hardware infrastructure in the public cloud. Security has to be managed by the customers. The cloud provider is not responsible for security concern. In the public cloud, your VM's application data are available publicly over the public IP address. If you have the internet, you can access or you can hack those VMs or data. So cloud providers provided the some security features. Okay, you can protect your resource in the public cloud. But those security modules or security tools which is provided by the public cloud providers, it is not enough. That will not meet your requirement. So this security is the customer responsibility. The security requirement, so your security requirements is your responsibility. The cloud provider is not responsible for any security breach. As a customer, you are responsible for configuring your firewall, network, remove all the public IP address, allow your corporate networks only. That is the customer responsibility. Customer can connect their on-premise corporate network with Azure network. Okay, and disallow all the connections from the internet. Okay, only they allow the connection from the corporate networks. That is the customer responsibility. Okay. Any questions here? Public cloud.
No.
Okay, so whatever the VMs you create in the Azure, that is created as a public resource, and it is available everywhere. You can access those from the everywhere. So in the corporate networks, so before implementations, they integrate their on-premise network with the cloud, Azure cloud, and they remove the internet connections. They remove the internet. They remove the access from the internet, and they allow only access from the corporate networks or through the VPN. So that is the first steps in the implementations. The network team will come into the pictures and they will set up the connections. Okay. And then after that you will come into the picture. Your infra team will come into the pictures. They will create the VMs. And then after that you will come into the pictures. You will install your SAP and the database. Okay. Private cloud. In the private cloud modules, you use the dedicated infrastructures that is accessible on the private networks. So this private cloud is nothing but your private data centers. Okay, which is uses the dedicated infrastructures which is accessible from your corporate network or private networks. Private cloud can be hosted in the on-premise cloud, in on-premise environment. The private cloud can be hosted in on-premise environment, but it can also be hosted on a third-party hosting providers. Okay, so you have the on-premise data center, there you can host your systems, or you can also use the third-party hosting providers like IBM. IBM, we can say that it is a third-party hosting providers. It has the private data centers. It is, we call it is a private cloud. Okay, if you want to host your services on your own data center, that is nothing but on-premise data center. We can say that your own data center, you have your own data centers and you are hosting your services, that is we call on-premise data centers. If you are hosting third party, the hosting provider like IBM, the HP, okay, so they provide the private cloud. Okay, two of the main reasons why companies choose a private clouds are privacy and regulatory concern. Okay, so why people choose for the private clouds? Because of privacy of data and the regulatory concern. Okay, we'll discuss more. Unlike the public cloud, the private clouds operate in a private networks, and that is only accessible for the single organizations. Businesses like banks and medical providers may have regulations in place that require certain data to be inaccessible from the internet. And in those situations, private cloud might be a good choice. So some of the organizations, some of the industry like the banks and then pharma companies, government has the regulations that you cannot have your data on the public cloud, like on Azure, Google Cloud, or AWS. You cannot host, you cannot put your data on the public cloud because of the government regulations. Okay, so they have to choose, they have to host their services or servers on the private cloud within the countries, not outside the countries. For example, in India, HDFC banks are there, Chipla companies are there, so they are Indian companies. Okay, so they are not allowed to host their servers outside the India. They have to use the data centers which is there in the India or Asia region. Okay, so it's all depends upon the government policies and then regulations. Those data cannot be put on the internet. Those data should not be accessible from the internet. So in this case, the private cloud is the good choice. If company runs a private cloud on premise, they will usually own the hardware and infrastructures used for private cloud. But it is also possible to host the private cloud in a third party data centers. So either the customers can have their own data centers or they can host their services in the third party data centers. If they are hosting in their own data center, then customer is whole and sole responsible for managing the hardware, everything. Okay, services, softwares, operating systems, network. Okay, SAP, database, everything. The customer will responsible in on-premise data center. If customer choose the third party data centers, then the third party vendor is responsible for managing the hardware, services, network, everything. Like for example, IBM. IBM provide the private data centers. Also, IBM provide the consultant, like network, consultant, then hardware infra consultant, then basis consultant. Okay, so they can provide, they can have all types of services. In the third party data centers, the customer doesn't manage anything. They pay the service charge as per the contracts, and then the third party like IBM, they manage the hardware and they also manage the operating system network and then SAP and database applications. Okay, so there are some disadvantages on the private cloud if you are hosting your private cloud on premise. Okay, just a minute. Just a minute. Just a minute. Okay, so there are some disadvantages to a private cloud. If you are hosting your private cloud on premise, you will likely spend as much as IT as you would. So in simple examples, in simple language. So what are the disadvantages? So cost is very high. Okay, so private cloud, the cost is very high. You need IT staff to manage your infrastructures. Okay, if you're hosting on your own private data centers, okay, on premise. So you as a customer is responsible for managing everything. Okay, so you require the IT team. Okay, infra team you need a security team, you need a OS team, you need a basis team. Okay, you need a backup teams. Okay, everything, all teams you need. Okay, so that will ये extra cost to you. To avoiding a IT cost, how you can avoid this cost? You can avoid this cost by choosing the third party hosting providers. So third party hosting provider, they will manage everything. Okay, they will charge some yearly cost, and they will provide everything, all the services. So in the third party hosting providers, they have many customers. Okay, so for example, you are working as a basis consultant. So not only you is managing only one customer, but you will managing the other customer as well. So shared services are there. And so in the third party hosting providers, they use the resources. They put the resource on a multiple customers. Okay, this way they can uh, their cost reduce. Okay, but if it is on premise, you as a customer, you are hosting everything, then you need a dedicated person. Okay, that is the difference. So yeah, so this is nothing but a private clouds. So the private cloud is only suitable for the banking or medical pharma company, or the company or industries. There is a regulation from the government that you cannot put your data on public data centers. Okay, those types of organization, they go with the private clouds. Okay, the hybrid cloud. So what is the difference between private cloud and then public cloud? So public cloud means bill per seconds. So whatever you use, you pay for that one. So billing is per seconds. In the private cloud, it is monthly or yearly. So you have to pay monthly or yearly as per the contract. Highly scalable on demand. Okay, scale often come with large lead times. So in the public cloud, if you want to scale up or scale out, then you can easily do, because in the public cloud we have the scaling and elasticity features. Okay, so which will quickly scale up your the VMs. But in the private cloud, you need your lead time. Okay, you need to prepared and you need to plan. Okay, so their lead time is required. Instance provisioning in the public cloud, no instance provisioning in the private cloud. The service configured by the end users. Okay, so service configured by the end user means customers. Here in the private cloud, service configured by the service providers. Okay, so service provider means third party. Okay, third party cloud providers. Use of multiple programming language. So here you can use a multiple programming language. You can automate your VMs creations, everything. Okay, in the public cloud. But here no programming language are available. So you automation is impossible in the private cloud. But in the public cloud, you can have the automations. Okay, you can in one click you can create a n number of VMs. But in the private cloud, you want to create a 10 VMs, then you have to create 10 VMs manually. The public cloud is the open source tools. Okay, so and it is integrated widely. Okay, so it is an open source tools. So most of the software you can integrate with the public cloud. Fewer integrations with open source tools. So in the public cloud, you cannot integrate your third party softwares with your public clouds. Okay, like if you see that in the cloud, public cloud, you can integrate your blockchain. Okay, blockchain, then artificial intelligence, machine learning languages. Okay, those you can integrate with the public clouds. But in the private clouds, it is possible, but it will take time. Okay, some of the uh, new technologies not able to, you won't able to integrate easily quickly in the private cloud, but in the public cloud you can integrate those very quickly. Automated tools you can use. Okay, as this public cloud is open source, you can use automated tools to automate everything. Okay. Service management and monitoring by the organization, service management and the monitoring by the service providers in the private cloud. So in the public cloud, the service management and monitor by the organizations. In the private cloud, service management and the monitoring by the service providers. Okay, so these are the difference between the private cloud and the public cloud. What is the hybrid cloud? The last one is the hybrid clouds. Hybrid cloud is a mix of the public cloud and then private clouds. In hybrid cloud environment, you may have applications running in the public clouds and database running on the on-premise, that is on the private cloud. Okay, so this is an example. So in the hybrid cloud, what is the hybrid cloud environment? The example is for hybrid cloud means some of the services you are running in the public clouds and then some of the services you are running in the private clouds. Okay, so these types of cloud we call a hybrid clouds. So applications you're running on the public cloud and your database data residing on the on-premise, that is on the private cloud. Okay, so this types of we call a hybrid clouds. So also there are some use cases, okay, where you can have the hybrid cloud, like many companies have their legacy on-premise systems. Okay, so those legacy systems, if you want to move to cloud, then it will be a very expensive. Okay, so some of the company legacy systems which are there on premise, if you move those legacy on premise systems to the cloud, then it will be a more expensive. So in that case, the customer keep the legacy systems on premise, and then the new systems they can build in the cloud. Okay, and this on premise and then your public cloud are integrated. Okay, so this types of cloud we also called hybrid cloud. So hybrid cloud means your private clouds and then your public clouds come into the pictures. Okay, another example is that, like you are running a production systems in on premise private cloud, and your non-production systems are in the public cloud. That is the example of the hybrid cloud as well. So this types of scenario you can also have. Another is that disaster recovery systems you are running in the cloud and your primary systems are running on the on-premise. Okay, so this is another example of the hybrid cloud. SAP systems in the private cloud and non-SAP system in the public cloud. Okay, so this is also example of the hybrid clouds. Some of these servers or services you have in the public cloud and some of the services you have in the private cloud, and both are integrated. Okay, so if you see hybrid cloud, on premise data center is there, this is on premise. Okay, primary application and then database. You have planned to have a DR in Azure. Okay, then you can have the Azure disaster recovery systems, a site in the Azure. You can replicate your application using the Azure site recovery in Azure DR. And for database replication, you can use the database replication tool like HANA system replication, Oracle for Oracle data guards. Okay, like this you can replicate your data to the Azure. So this is one of the example of the hybrid clouds. Okay. Any questions till now? Any questions, doubt? समझ में आ रहा है?
हाँ हाँ समझ में आ रहा है.
Okay, fine. The last is the business continuity and the fault tolerance and disaster recovery. So whatever you are discussing, this is just the basic of your cloud. So what is there in the cloud? Basically, we have the cloud services, cloud modules, and then business continuity, and then disaster recovery. So these are the basic of your cloud. So cloud consists of these all services. So what is the business continuity, fault tolerance, and the disaster recovery? So the cloud providers provide the HA, high availability, and then disaster recovery. Every cloud providers provide these services. It is part of the cloud services. So in terms of your availability, so fault tolerance means the cloud providers monitor your health of your infrastructures. When VM becomes unhealthy, the cloud providers can automatically move you to healthy VMs without you having to do anything. This is called fault tolerance. So what is the fault tolerance? The cloud providers, Azure example, they monitor your VMs. Okay, if they see that your VMs is unhealthy, okay, and is becoming unhealthy, then cloud providers automatically move your VM to the healthy environment. Okay, without notifying you. Okay, this make your VMs available and 24/7. So this types of scenario we call fault tolerance. So the cloud providers provided the fault tolerance. If any VMs is unhealthy, then it automatically move to the some other rack within the data centers. So your VMs are there on the physical hardware. The physical hardware are there in the rack. Okay, if some issue is there on your physical hardware or your rack or power supplier for that hardware or that rack, then automatically your cloud provider will move your VMs to the another the rack or another physical machines. Okay, it is does automatically. So they have to ensure that your VM should be available 24/7. Business continuity and disaster recovery. Cloud providers also operate across multiple data centers that are in different regions of the world. If a natural disasters or any other disasters happen in one region, you can switch over to the another region. Assuming you have replicated your environment in multiple regions. This kind of planning is called business continuity and disaster recovery. The cloud providers often have features in, in place to make implementing a plan easy. This is often referred to as disaster recovery. So the cloud providers provide a disaster recovery features. Okay, you want to use, you can use. So the data centers, we have the multiple data centers. If any of the data center goes down, then if you have replicated your systems to another region or another data centers, then you can switch on your disaster systems. Okay, disaster side, and then you can, if anything goes wrong to your your primary data center, then you can switch on your disaster recovery side. This feature is available in all the cloud providers. Okay, so it is a simple, it's not a big deal. So all the cloud providers, they provide the disaster site. Okay, if you want to use, you use it, you replicate your application, your data. Okay, if any disaster is happening, then you switch to the DR side. Okay, the thing is that only you have to replicate your environment from your one center to another centers. If you have not enabled or replicated, then definitely you don't have the DR. You are not using the DR. Okay. So it is customer choice whether customer want to go with the DR or not. Okay. But fault tolerance is there by default by the cloud providers. Disaster recovery is provided by the uh, service provider, but it is depends upon the customers. If customer want to use, they have to replicate your environment from primary to secondary side. Okay, fine. Any questions here till now? Any questions?
No question.
No, no, sir.
Okay, so we'll stop here. Okay, and then next week we will start with the Azure. What are the core Azure services? Okay, lot of Azure services we have. We need to understand those. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So we'll stop. I'll share the recording. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye.